We will make a start. So good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the October Planning Committee. It's good to see everybody. Do we have any apologies, first of all, please?
Yes, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Riley. Councillor Hendy will be substituting. We have apologies from Councillor Ney. Councillor Rainsford will be substituting. And we've received apologies from Councillor Darcy.
Okay. Welcome to our substitutes. Thank you very much indeed. Declarations of interest is item number 2. I would like to declare a private interest on item 6.2, in as much as I know the applicant, who is a fellow councillor. Can I assume that everybody else wants to make a similar one? So rather than ask 12 people with their hands up, if we can take that as read, if nobody objects. Aside from that one, are there any other interests anyone wants to declare at this stage? No. As ever, if anything occurs to you during the meeting, wait till the next gap, so when the person speaking is finished, and then we'll pop it on the record. So thank you for that. Any issues with the minutes of the last meeting from the 19th of September? No. If not, I will sign them as a true record. And Andrew, I'd be grateful if you could pass it on to the team. Thank you. There's no urgent business from me. Don't think we have any questions from the public. Is that right? Thank you. Takes us on then to item number 6, which are the planning applications for today. First one is 6.1. It's on page 5. And we're at 31 North Road East. And Sam, whenever you're ready, please.
Thank you. The application before members today is the change of use of 31 North Road East from a dental practice to 3 flats. Planning permission was previously granted under delegated authority back in January to convert the property to 2 flats. The dental practice has closed, with the company moving services previously offered at the site to a larger existing practice in Milehouse. The property is Grade 2 listed as part of the wider terrace, but the impacts of the proposal on the listed building are not being considered as part of this application. Separate listed building consent would be needed to be sought prior to any works taking place if planning permission for the change of use is granted by members. So the slide on the screen is just highlighting the property there on North Road East in the middle of the terrace. And the same again, just with the sort of aerial view. And there's a photograph of the property there. In the middle, the one with the blue car and the yellow bin outside of it. The current slide on screen shows the existing layout of the property, which is a 2-storey former terraced house with additional rooms in the roof space. There is an existing small hard standing area with a drop curb to the front of the property and a rear yard, which can be accessed from a service lane. Ooh. Okay. This slide now is showing the layout of the 2 flats which were previously approved. This scheme included a 1-bed flat on the ground floor and a 4-bed maisonette covering the first floor and the rooms in the roof. A small first floor rear extension to the tenement was approved, bringing the first floor out to match the length of the ground floor. And just to demonstrate that, I don't know if the mouse is going to be on the screen. No, it's not. But if you look at the 2 elevation drawings to the bottom, the one on the left, which is from the side, if you look at I'll flick back and forward between the 2 so you can see the extension that was, so just where there's a sloping roof on the ground floor on the existing, there's a small first floor rear extension there with a flat roof. So that's just to illustrate that, which we approved previously, officers under delegated authority. And also there's a sort of a store, in a sort of a derelict store in the rear yard, which is proposed to be removed and replaced with bike storage. Whilst to officers' knowledge, the work on implementing this approved scheme has not commenced. Work to do so could commence imminently. As such, the principle of the residential use of the site has been established, with the dental use having already been lost in practice. Officers understand that the loss of a dental practice does raise concerns, given wider concerns relating to provision, but it was considered previously that due to the relocation of the existing offer and patients elsewhere, the impact of such was limited. It is unlikely that officers would approve such a property to become a dental practice now, and changes to the use class order and permitted development rights over the past few years mean that it is now easier to open dental practices in existing high street type units should a provider wish to do so. Given the various empty units on Nutley Plain and North Hill nearby, there is scope for a dental practice to open without the need for planning permission. Turning to the current proposal, this slide shows the layout of the 3 flats proposed, which was originally submitted to officers. This layout, though, is no longer being considered due to concerns raised regarding the floor space of one of the flats. This scheme showed a 1-bed flat on the ground floor, a 2-bed flat on the first floor, and a 1-bed flat within the roof space. The flat, which would have been solely contained within the roof space, was considered to be too small based on the nationally described space standards, and officers would have recommended refusal on occupant amenity grounds had the plans not subsequently been changed. This slide shows the plans currently under consideration and now has 3 1-bed flats, with 1 on the ground floor, 1 on the first floor, and a third which straddles the first floor and the roof space. All of the flats are now considered to meet the space standards and would provide acceptable levels of accommodation in officers' view. It is unusual for a flat to have a bedroom on one floor and the rest of its rooms on another floor, but officers do not consider that this is a reason for refusal, and the flat would still be fully self-contained. It is not ideal either that the occupier of the same flat would not have access to the rear yard without having to walk around via the service lane. Officers do not consider this to be a significant enough issue to warrant a refusal, however, as the property's bins are collected from the front and are likely to be stored at the front, as is typical of other properties in the street, and all flats have access to the front through the front door. The other 2 flats would have access to the rear yard, and the previously mentioned extension is that was it done to serve that, to create a rear access from the first floor, and that is proposed again with this application. The Highway Authority were consulted on the scheme and raised no objections. Some off-street parking exists on the front hard standing, and the area is within a controlled parking zone, which is a strict one between, I believe, hold on, let me check the times. Between 10 a.m. and 5 p.m. daily, except on Sundays. And the flats would be exempt from obtaining parking permits, so occupiers would realistically not be able to park in the area. Bike storage is proposed also within the rear yard. In conclusion, officers consider that the scheme is acceptable in line with JLP policies and are recommending it for approval. The principle of residential use of the site has previously been established by the previous approval, and it is considered that the flats, following the changes made, all meet the space standards, so accord with Dev 10 of the Joint Local Plan. Conditions have been recommended relating to the inclusion of formal bike and bin storage, which would need to be in place prior to the flat's occupation. Thanks.
Sam, thank you very much. Excuse me. We have one speaker on this item, Councillor Steve Ricketts, no stranger to the committee's deliberations. If you'd like to make your way down, Steve, it'll come as absolutely no surprise that you have 5 minutes. Would you like to be told when 4 have gone?
Yes, please.
Okay. The clock will start when you do.
Good afternoon. North Road East, obviously famous street in Plymouth. I'm sure we've all driven up and walked it many, many times. Fantastic, iconic buildings, those Grade 2 listed buildings, and we need to look after our thoroughfares and things that make Plymouth unique. Obviously, Plymouth is a dental desert, okay? We all know it's a massive issue with having a lack of dental provision within the city. So it does break my heart to lose such a community facility, and hopefully we can, you can support me on this. There's a massive shortfall of provision. But where we are with this particular application is detail, okay? So we had a slideshow there, but the most important slide is the here and now slide, yeah, of the living conditions that people will live in. Now these buildings on North Road East are solid, well laid out buildings, yeah? They should be very easy to convert into a good organised state for people to live in. I'm shocked at what's come out in this latest proposal, because it says unusual, I would say shambolic, for the size and feel of that particular building. That, just imagine yourself living in that block, okay? Just look at it there. You've got a bedroom just sort of at the top of the stairs, and then you have to go up to the rest of the facility. There's no way anyone should properly plan living conditions like that. There's no need for it with that space that that building has, okay? This street, this building, this city deserves better than for living arrangements like that to be squashed in. Absolutely no need whatsoever. Added to that, whoever's living there has no rear access. Okay, this is completely ill thought out. The bin storage is then a complete nightmare, as we all know, on North Road East, because that person will not be able to take their rubbish out properly. It's complete overdevelopment. And we have a duty to make sure we do things properly. And when they're not done properly, we should say so. It does not have, as acknowledged in the report, proper amenity space. I'm sure many of you know how passionate I am about having proper community outside space. So again, it's compounded by that issue as well. This is shambolic, okay, on the pragmatic level on this particular application. It's overdevelopment and should be refused. It should be refused on overdevelopment alone. We can throw in it's prejudicial to community cohesion and community well-being, which is in the national policy document framework. Please refuse. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Steve. It's now open to the committee. Okay, well, I'll crack on first then and put perhaps one or two of the issues that we've just heard. Where are we with the usage? Because up until now, it's been a dental practice. Where are we then in terms of the use that's proposed within the application?
What do you mean? What does that mean? Where are we with that?
Well, Councillor Ricketts was concerned about the lack of a site with permission for a dental practice.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can only really, I suppose, reiterate what I've said before. I mean, ultimately, the dental use has ceased naturally. The company has moved itself to Milehouse. We've given consent previously based on that to use it to be 2 flats. That could be implemented tomorrow. It might not ever be implemented, but ultimately we consider the dental use to be lost. And as I said previously as well, it's very easy for somebody to open a dental practice should they want to do so. I mean, that now falls under what's known as Class E in the use class order, which essentially covers most high street type uses. So, for example, any of the, unless there were restrictive conditions in place on previous consents, which, generally isn't the case, then, any of the empty properties on Mutley Plain could be converted to a dentist without the need for planning permission. So it's more the case of, somebody would need to be there to provide it. Ultimately, we can't control that as a local authority. We can't force somebody to run any business from any property. So, I mean, if this was to be refused, then I suppose there is the chance that somebody could take it back up again, but we can't guarantee that to be the case. But also tomorrow they could implement their consent for 2 flats. So that's where we are.
So that consent that they've got already was established earlier this year?
In January we approved it, yes.
And no local councillors thought to refer that into the planning committee?
It wasn't referred, no, it was issued under delegated authority.
Okay, that's helpful, thanks. Alison?
Yeah, it's just a question about accessibility and suitability for a dental practice in the future, because it looks to me as though it's not level access on the way in, which is not good for a lot of patients, and it stairs all the way through the building. So its suitability as a dentist surgery, I would think, is probably not there anymore.
Yeah, I suppose it's sort of not for me to comment on how somebody would want to use it, but I mean, I take your point. I mean, this is a historic dental practice I'm not sure when it opened as a dentist. We have a planning consent going back to the 80s, which says retention of dental use. So it's at least, so one would assume by the wording of that, the use was established prior to the 80s. Maybe it was done prior to the current kind of planning legislation. Our records go back to about 75. So maybe there was a consent prior to then under a different system, or it was done without consent and was regularized later. So it's a historic use. And like I say, it's probably not one that we would approve today in this location. We would direct this sort of development towards like a local centre, such as Mutley Plain or similar. So I take your point, but like I say, it's not really for me to sort of, dentists could still operate from there. The use is what it is. It's maybe that's why they don't want to. Possibly that's a reason they don't want to, but that's sort of conjecture. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay, Alison? Thanks. Joshua's next.
Apologies. My initial question was going to be, is a terraced property optimal for a dental practice? But you've answered that with the last question, so it's not. Clarity for myself. So for the top flat, the way I read the plan was that you enter through a lobby space, you can then come off that space into a bedroom or living space, however you choose to use it, and then you go up the stairs to the rest of that flat. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I don't know if I can get the mouse on here. Probably, I don't think I can for some reason. But so if you look on the second one in from the left, you can see where the stairs are.
Yeah.
So you've got then the stairs go up from the first floor, and then you've got a door on either side there. So the door to the right will go into the flat that's on the first floor, and then the door to the left goes into the flat. That's the private entrance then of the flat, which is on...
Straddles 2 floors.
But yeah, straddles. Yeah. Then you've got, like you say, you've got, on the plan it's marked as bedroom, but they could put their living room there if they wanted to. There's nothing to stop them doing that on that floor, and then you go up the stairs again to the rest of the flat.
So we're talking about property where you enter on one level, you have the opportunity to come into a bedroom or living space, and then you have stairs going up to the rest of the property.
Yes.
Okay. I was just a bit confused from some of the statements previously, because I kind of understood that's how a lot of people live in our country.
Well, I suppose in the sense of a normal house, but I suppose it's not that common, maybe not for a flat, potentially.
Okay. So
but
would that make it a maisonette then in that case?
I suppose you could call it a maisonette, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
We didn't consider that, as officers, we didn't consider that a concern.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Josh. Thanks. Maddie was next.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, given the location, I'm actually surprised it's not student accommodation, so that's a relief. It's not a HMO. I'm also concerned about the top floor bedroom. If there was a fire, is there a fire escape? Is there going to be a spiral staircase or some form of fire escape? Because I'm just, obviously, Grenfell Tower is still very much in our mind. I know that's not the extent of this. However, I think it's still reasonable that whoever is asleep in that bedroom should have access to a fire escape on the top floor if such a travesty, something like that actually happened. That's my first question, please, Chair.
So there's no sort of formal expectation for such under planning legislation, but fire escapes are dealt with through building regulations. So this, if there was a need for such, based on the size of the property, then that would need to be dealt with as part of the building regulations process.
Additional question, please, Chair. So you mentioned it's 3 flats. There will be 2 allocated parking spaces. So part part of my question is who will actually get those parking spaces? And the second part is, it actually, you mentioned, it also says in the papers that permits will be withheld from this property. How long will that be for? Will that be indefinitely? Because properties like this do change as families grow, people move on. So I just wondered, so it's 2 questions, please. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, so my understanding is the parking spaces exist as part of a historic hard standing. I don't know how that would be allocated. That would be up to the owner of the property to deal with as part of his leasing agreements. But as far as your question about parking permits, that would be indefinitely, unless there was a change of use again. Say, for example, if there was a consent then to make it back into one dwelling, as it historically would have been, then that would be kind of reconsidered again. But as far as this consent's concerned, none of these 3 flats would be eligible for parking permits.
Thanks. Anybody else? No? Well, if we're ready to move to a decision, that's great. I think we've asked some very relevant questions here, but I really can't see an issue with it. It's already been established earlier on in the year that residential occupation is acceptable in planning terms, and the layouts do change, and we live in, I think as Josh was saying, a society where there's no uniformity, and that's part of the beauty of the planning process, to try and get designs to fit whatever location we're looking at. And Maddie's helpfully reminded us with her question that the parking situation won't be added to, because there'll be no additional on-street parking because of the lack of permits available. So I think for me, it ticks all the boxes, and I'm happy to support the conditional granting as recommended. So if we could move to the vote, please. Okay, so I will declare that one passed. Thank you very much. Everyone, you didn't change your mind. I was looking, Jeremy, just to see if you reach. Never forget, never forget. Okay, so we're going to move on to item 6.2. And we're at the Stables 41 Conqueror Drive. Now, as we established with the declarations of interest earlier, this is only here because of the identity of the applicant, so we wouldn't normally have a presentation. But if there are any questions about the presentation or the planning issues, then I will certainly invite Macaulay to do just that. Do people want to hear the presentation, or are we happy to move? Maddie?
Chair, in light of the fact that we all know Tess, this is only here because she's a councillor, and I've actually read this paper through and through. I have no reason to object to this at all, so I'm happy if you want to proceed. Thank you, Chair.
Is there any objection to that? That's certainly how we'd normally do it, but I'd always give people a chance to, if anything does leap out that people are unhappy or unsure about. So if we're okay to move to the vote, we'll do just that. The recommendation on page 15 is to grant conditionally. So if we can open the voting. Thank you. I'll declare that one passed. And we move on to item 6.3, page 21. We're back at the land adjacent to Wilmot Gardens, and Macaulay, I'm sure, will all appreciate the presentation this time.
Thank you, Chair. Before I begin with the presentation, I would like to draw members' attention to a couple of changes in the main report and corresponding addendum report. Firstly, paragraph 18 now acknowledges that although Bladder Meadow was reported at a 250-metre walking distance from Wilmot Gardens, this is the measurement to the entrance point of the meadow itself. If considering the play park within Bladder Meadow, then it is a total of 680 metres walking distance. Moreover, officers have also included the Dingwall Avenue play area, which is approximately 600 metres away. Secondly, paragraphs 49 and 50 provide some commentary on an updated submission of the biodiversity net gain small sites metric, which, whilst not required for this application, contained an inaccuracy in one of the rows which has now been corrected and has been verified by natural infrastructure officers. This correction does not change the recommendation in terms of policy Dev 26 of the Joint Local Plan and sets out 3 specific reasons for this, as detailed in paragraph 49 of the officer report. Third point, an addendum report was published yesterday following the submission of 2 further objection letters received on the 22nd of October, which had revised the objection count to 47. No new material planning matters were raised. I must also report that after the addendum was published, 4 further objections were received late yesterday and similarly do not raise any new planning matters which haven't already been considered. Following the determination of this application, the report will be amended again to reflect the final objection count of 51 objections. That's just a reminder that's the site. So the application was reported to Planning Committee on the 29th of August and was deferred for the following 4 reasons. A response or report from a qualified arboriculturist on the impact on the root system and a request for their attendance at committee, a request to investigate the possibility of a resurfacing and reconfiguration of the car park pertaining to disability requirements and resurfacing, further confirmation of the application for a tree preservation order, whether remaining trees would be subject to a TPO, clarity on the site's categorization as surplus to requirement, including information on community use through the submission of an open space assessment. So I'll now go point by point. So in summary, on point 1, an independent arborist has been consulted on the proposed development and is of the opinion that the trees are unlikely to survive with the current layout due to root protection area incursions. Concerns relating to shading, maintenance and the presence of ash dieback have also been highlighted. This is set out in detail in paragraphs 59 to 65 of the report. Point 2, on the grasscrete solution, this would normally be applied for permeable ground conditions. In this case, the ground failed 2 trial pit soakaway tests. Therefore, the applicant opted for and designed an attenuated system with discharge into a southwest water sewer. Attenuated being the storage of water in the system which is slowly released back into a watercourse or sewer system. The installation of such a material, such as grasscrete, with this conflicting system could lead to frequent saturation, soil displacement, pooling of surface water and high maintenance costs. Moreover, grasscrete is considered an unsuitable surface for the disabled parking bay due to its uneven nature. On the disabled bay, it is in the proposed position as the gradient and slope is gentler here than the area closer to the dwellings and conforms to the Department for Transport's Inclusive Mobility Guide. Specifically, the distance of the bay to the dwelling is approximately 20 metres, which is well within the limits of figure 3.4 of that document, which covers walking distances. And we also considered the issue of positioning the disabled bay closer and then having to reconfigure the stepped access, which would require a substantial redesign of the layout. Point 3, the Council's tree officer confirms that the request for a TPO is under consideration, awaiting the outcome of the planning decision. The tree officer made it clear that it is a TPO request with the Council Street Services, not a TPO application. They are two separate matters. Further, any future TPO application and the consideration of this planning application are dealt with under two separate processes, and the tree officer confirms that at this time it is not expedient to place a TPO on the affected trees, as PCH, Plymouth Community Homes, are a partner organisation and there is no current threat to the trees. It is also important to add that the site has been in and out of the planning system for the last 4 years and the trees have not at any time been under threat. However, regardless of the decision on any future TPO application, i.e. whether all the affected and retained trees are designated tree preservation order status, would not alter the officer recommendation, as the quality and value of the trees have already been assessed in accordance with Planning Policy Dev 28 and the appropriate mitigation has been sought. The value of the trees is therefore not disputed by both the tree officer and the local planning authority. And for further details on this, please refer to paragraphs 42 to 44 for the tree assessment. On point 4, as set out in the main report, this proposal has been assessed as being contrary to Policy Dev 27, paragraph 2, and it is concluded that there is a loss of open space in planning terms when applying the tests of this policy. Separate from the planning process, the site went through a formal loss of public open space process in accordance with Section 123 of the Local Government Act 1972 in 2019. In planning terms, the site is not required to satisfy the provisions afforded to designated green spaces as outlined in the Joint Local Plan Supplementary Planning Document, which includes the submission of an open space assessment. The site does not feature in the Plymouth Open Space Assessment, which was conducted for the Joint Local Plan, as it falls below the 0.2 hectare threshold for inclusion. An open space assessment has, however, been carried out for the site for informative purposes, and the results reaffirm that the site is not of sufficient quality for green space designation on the open space assessment scoring alone. Whilst not definitive, the open space assessment does go some way to demonstrate the green space's attributes relative to the hierarchy of open spaces in the Joint Local Plan. From this, we can infer that there is some community use in terms of various activities as described in section B4, which covers informal recreation, such as dog walking, general walking, children's play, and sitting and relaxing. This is supported by the numerous letters of objection which highlight similar recreational activities by the local community as reported in section 6 of the officer report. In requesting these further details, officers have had to apply proportionality in terms of the level of information requested here in the context of the undesignated nature of the site and what Policy Dev 27 requires in terms of specific information, the requirements of which are listed in paragraph 2 of this policy. That concludes the presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Macaulay, thank you very much. We have two speakers on this item. The first is Mr. Matt Fleming. If you'd like to, there we are, if you'd like to make your way down. You two will have 5 minutes. Would you like to be told when only one is left?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes, please, Chair.
In your own time, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, councillors, officers. I'm Matt Fleming, Secretary for the Crown Hill Local Area Residents Association, and I'd like to thank you all for allowing me to once again to come and speak to you all on this matter. I will, of course, restrict my address to the 4 reasons for deferral that you must deliberate today. However, I also must draw the committee's attention to a change in the recommendation report since the August meeting, which you've just heard about, in fact. We have had a complaint to the council reviewed and upheld regarding a significantly inaccurate B&G assessment that was submitted last time. We would like the committee to note that the officers now agree with our previous conclusion that there will actually be a 48% net loss on this site. This seems to have been glossed over and dismissed in the officers' report, report. I urge the committee to ensure that they are satisfied with the amended justification, which seems to be criticising Deborah and the metric itself, and seems to have plucked a biodiversity gain out of thin air. Our view is that there is no evidence whatsoever to demonstrate that there will be any enhancements or anything but a significant biodiversity loss. The applicants could have used a statutory metric which has been designed to take into account the time it takes to achieve the target condition of new habitats. This has not been used, most likely because this still shows a significant loss. No evidence of updated calculations has been submitted, and this is extremely concerning. We have requested sight of the updated metric and the ecologist's latest advice, but have not received a response. I also note that another inaccuracy in the previous report, which has also just been spoken about, is about Bladder Meadow, which was said to be 250 metres from our green. As we have maintained since the start, this has been recalculated to more than 800 metres away, which is, of course, double the recommendations of our own JLP. It's worth noting that approving a development like this in breach of the council's own policies and based on misleading and inaccurate information is likely to lead to a successful legal challenge. Okay, I'll address the four deferral reasons now. One, we acknowledge the professional opinion of the arborist that the root damage may affect the viability of the trees, but we would question the justification to downgrade ash trees due to the potential for future dieback. The report insinuates that the trees have dieback, but this is not actually being detected. We wish to see clarification on this and would like the committee to note that downgrading healthy ash due to their potential to succumb to dieback in the future goes against the advice of the Arboricultural Association, the Woodland Trust, and other important organisations. Some ash trees have genetic resistance to dieback, and healthy ash must therefore be retained. Two, we question whether the disabled parking bay and drop-off bay would meet the practical needs of the disabled resident, even if it's deemed to meet the requirements on paper. There seems to have been no attempt made to allow a disabled resident to park outside their own home. Three, the fact that the TPO application is still pending after 6 months is wholly unacceptable and makes a mockery of the whole TPO system. We're aware that a TPO alone cannot protect our trees from being removed for this development, but an approved or rejected TPO application would have been important evidence for the committee members to take into consideration. We urge the committee to recognise the inadequacy of this response. And four, at the last meeting we understood that a community use assessment would be taking place before this meeting. While we as residents have been ready to assist on this, this clearly has not been done. How can there be any clarity on residents' use of space without actually asking the residents themselves? And how has the green been monitored on dry days to assess this use? Surely these are the only methods to prove to you how popular this green is with our community. The OSA results are arbitrary and out of date, so this condition has not been met. We agree with the planning officer that it has not been demonstrated that our community green is surplus to requirements and that the application is not compliant with Dev 27. The planning officer suggests this is in part mitigated by the previous following of correct procedures under Local Government Act 1972. We argue that the requirements of this act are so minimal that they do not practically allow for any community awareness of their land being sold off. There was a notice buried in the Herald during lockdown, and that was it. So the local community has had no awareness whatsoever that their green was being sold off. If the council had wanted to inform us, notices would have been erected, and they were not. The response also seems to downgrade the importance of our community green because it had no official designation. Planning policy clearly states that undesigned green spaces are equally included in the policy. We reiterate the designation status is not relevant here when considering Dev 27. We'd also draw the committee's attention to NPPF, paragraph 103, which states in part, existing open space should not be built on unless an assessment has been undertaken which has clearly shown the land to be surplus to requirements. If the application is approved, we request an explanation as to why this clear national policy has been disregarded. So to summarise, we appeal to you to refuse this application. You have a choice here today. We need more houses in Plymouth, but you must balance that with protecting our ever-decreasing amounts of green, open community spaces. This is your opportunity to make sure that balance remains in our beautiful city. It will deprive our community of its only green space in a highly built-up area. This is for a minuscule amount of homes. This proposed development does not outweigh the needs of our community to access our only green space for our health and well-being. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Fleming. Our next speaker is Mr. Battle. Is Mr. Battle? There we are. You're welcome to join us. 5 minutes will be allocated to you too. Would you like to be told when 4 have gone?
Yes, please.
Okay. When you're ready, sir.
Good afternoon, committee. My name is Jason Battle from Studio JB Architectural Services, who are the lead consultants on this project for the applicants, Classic Builders.
Mr. Battle, perhaps could you get a bit closer? You're welcome to sit down if you choose, but people seem to be having a bit of trouble with the voice there. Thanks.
lead consultants on this project for the applicants, Classic Builders and Plymouth Community Homes. My speech is purely to emphasise the process we have undertaken over the past 4 years to achieve a scheme that is fully supported by Plymouth City Council Planning Department. The site was legally disposed of by Plymouth City Council in November 2020 following a formal loss of public open space process, which only had one objection. The land was then subsequently deemed surplus to requirements and put up for sale in 2021 with a planning statement which promoted the land for residential development. This is a critical factor in our clients purchasing the site, as the land is effectively undesignated green space for development. Without the land legal disposal and undesignated land classification, we wouldn't have pursued development for this site. We have worked extensively with the planning department via a pre-plan application and 2 full planning applications to achieve a scheme that is supported by the planning department. In that process, we have reduced the number of dwellings from 7 to 5. We have looked and worked at 7 configurations of dwelling layouts to mitigate the tree loss and the impact on the surrounding dwellings. We have reduced the garden sizes, reconfigured dwelling internal layouts, and reduced footpaths to create a community garden and to retain as much green space as practically possible. We have held public consultations twice and addressed matters and incorporated changes into the scheme where possible. We have tried to mitigate the loss of trees, 3 of which have ash dieback and have shortened lifespans. If we could have possibly saved any of these trees, we would have, but due to site constraints, it wasn't achievable as there were other impacts on surrounding dwellings, site topography issues, further impact on other trees, and highways non-compliancy. The tree loss, however, has been substantiated by 12 new trees being planted on-site and 17 trees being planted off-site, which, due to the condition of the existing trees, is an increase in biodiversity, as confirmed by the Council's own ecological consultant. In respect to the matters raised at the previous committee meeting relating to the road service and disability requirements, I can confirm that the site proposals meet criteria under Part M42 Accessibility and Adaptable Dwellings. It is not a full wheelchair user dwelling and has been discussed and approved by Plymouth City Council Housing Delivery Team. The road surface cannot be changed to a grasscrete project, as this is classed as an uneven surface, and coupled with the fact that the site ground conditions are not suitable for a permeable surface project due to the poor ground percolation testing results. The parking bay also has been sited in a position that suits site topography, as the ground levels will be flatter in this location, and is also compliant with M42. This scheme will be 100% affordable housing and will contribute towards Plymouth City Council's plans for home site. These sites are much needed in the city and this project would commence early next year, as Plymouth Community Homes and Plymouth City Council Housing Department has a considerable waiting list for this property type. We hope you can see that we have spent considerable time and effort on this project to address challenging matters.
1 minute.
And you can support our proposals. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Mr. Batley, if you'd like to make your way back, and it's now open to the committee. Macaulay, can I first thank you for the work you've done? It's not often that we go into this much depth with deferrals, but thank you for all that you've done. An awful lot, I think, of what was brought up at the last committee. I think we've got some clarity that's extremely useful here, but obviously we'll need to go through the committee itself, and Maddie has indicated first.
I'm sorry, Chair. Which committee did the plans actually come to? Because there's no plans on there. I haven't seen the position of the properties, the proposed properties. I haven't seen pictures of the trees that are actually currently under threat. Right, so I haven't had a chance to see this, so...
Yeah, so this was a committee that you were unable to be at. It was the August 29th of August one, and I think you arranged for a substitute. And the issues that we decided to defer for are the issues that we will be discussing today,
Thank you, Chair.
which are the four that Macaulay outlined. Apologies, Maddie.
Thank you. Can I just ask, so following Mr Fleming's extremely quick and eloquent speech, which I felt needed a round of applause, to be honest, because the speed and delivery was amazing, I was quite exhausted. Has a tree survey actually been performed on this site? Because, you know, obviously the report says about ash dieback 5 to 10 years, etc. However, if they are healthy, they are worth retaining. And I wondered, what's the age of the actual, the mature oak trees? Because oak trees are, they're protected. So, I mean, has there been adequate time actually for a TPO to be actually submitted?
Yeah, so there was a arboricultural report which was submitted back in March, which, if I go onto this plan here, this is the accompanying tree constraints plan that was submitted, highlighting the 5 trees that need to be removed because of the root incursions, and shows the 5 trees to the south adjacent to the community garden which needs to be retained. If there's any specific queries on the trees themselves, I'll have to defer to the arborist.
But has a tree survey actually been performed on the quality and the health of those trees? That's the question.
Yeah. So in the arbor report, pages 8 and 9, it highlights that 3 of the trees show signs of ash dieback. The oak tree in the middle of the site is category A, which is a high amenity value for a tree. And yeah, further details are set out in the arboricultural report, which was released back in March.
I just wondered, has any of the committee actually seen that report? Has anyone else had a chance to read that report? Because this is actually about protecting wildlife, protecting trees. So I just felt that was quite important.
The documents have been live for some time, so you could have approached the officers to ask for that instead of waiting for the full committee. In fairness,
I agree,
Maddie.
Chair, but I agree. But I mean, this is the first time I've seen this application, so I'm afraid I'm actually sat here.
Well, it was sent to you a week ago, so if you're not looking through the reports, then that's something that
I received my report last night, Chair, because the actual original report was sent to Maddie Halifax and not Councillor Maddie Bridgman. So I only received my report last night, so I do apologise. And I have read it and I've annotated all over it late last night, and so that's why I'm sat here slightly blindsided by the fact that I actually haven't seen the original plans.
Well, is it the case that councillors aren't getting reports because this is extremely serious and this isn't a planning issue as such? Well, hang on, this isn't a planning issue, but if I weren't and I presume this goes for the 2 that we've already decided this afternoon. Yeah, no, you didn't get those either. It's the full gamut of the applications.
No, I've received the full report last night. Someone very kindly delivered it to my house.
What I'm asking is, the 2 that we've already decided in North Road and Conqueror Drive, you didn't get those either.
Yeah, I've read them. I received it last night.
You didn't get those in the full 7 days that we're supposed to?
No.
Along with what we're discussing now?
No.
Is that correct?
If you didn't, Councillor Bridgman, I apologise. They are published online a good week before the committee sits, and they're freely available.
Is it on this? Hang on. Oh, well, is it on this item, Matt? Yes, go on then.
I can see that, sorry, the email that went to all of Planning Committee last week with the reports on the 15th of October did get sent to Councillor Bridgman's email address, so
I can verify that.
I can see it on my laptop now.
Yeah, go on. You want to... Well, put the microphone on. I don't like having these intimate conversations at a public committee, Stuart.
No, Chair, I was just pulling up the distribution list for the agenda pack to check the names, and Councillor Maddie Bridgman's email address is on there, so if it wasn't received, there must be a technical issue.
And that was sent when?
On the 15th of October.
Which was Someone who's better than
The,
maths.
on
help me out.
the Tuesday when the reports are published, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I left a message for Stuart on the telephone, and yesterday he forwarded me the original email, so I did have a look through.
Josh, I think I saw you.
Yeah, I'd like to express thanks as well. Apologies, I'll get used to it in the end. Yeah, thank you for the extra work and the route mapping. You know, that's clarified a lot there. I think one of the pieces for me that needs to be confirmed is, you know, we've heard from Matt Fleming today, who spoke very eloquently. I think the piece for me that would be good to confirm for the committee is the detail around the 3 trees, the ash trees. Do they have dieback or not? And I think that would really sort of help us understand the situation, because we're hearing 2 different things here.
I could defer to the arborist for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my name's Simon. I was the arboriculturist, which has been asked a few questions on this project. To go back to the ash dieback, T1 has got high levels of ash dieback as assessed on site, and in my opinion has got a low likelihood of long-term survival or viability for the site, regardless of development. The other ash trees on site, the further 2, infection levels aren't as high as T1. However, ash dieback is notably present through the symptoms that are there, the thin canopy and the epicormic that's growing, the smaller branches that are growing from the main stem, which would indicate a level of infection.
Thank you. I think that's really good and important to clarify. I know I probably speak for everyone here that trees are important to all of us right now, more than ever, and having that clarity that dieback is present, I think, is very, very important. I have a follow-up question, if that's okay, Chair. The other piece that I think would be useful to get clarity around was the understanding of net gain. And again, there was mention of different metrics used. And I guess the implication was that those were used to try to create a positive where there wasn't one. Could you talk to us a bit on that, please?
Yeah, so as I think this was reported in the previous committee, but the application is not subject to mandatory biodiversity net gain. However, a metric was submitted with the application. It was more for informative purposes for our natural infrastructure officers. But because it's not subject to that mandatory net gain, we refer back to our more traditional policies, in this case, Policy Dev 26, which doesn't specify, for example, 10% net gain. It basically looks for some enhancements on site which we consider have been secured, either on plan or through condition.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that just about answers that. I had one last follow-up piece, which was around the community use assessment, and we obviously spoke to that issue previously. I personally understand now, we heard last time, because we were talking around inaccuracies, that the Manadon Sports Hub was inaccessible for people, yet when I've gone away and spoken to the team there is actually a walking track around that. So I think that's maybe an important note, an inaccuracy to readdress, because I think we pulled that out, but actually it's probably something that needs to go back in. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. Angela.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to say I found this whole case really difficult, and especially when we have another passionate presentation today. But I do think we went over it in great detail last time in August. A lot of issues were raised, which, as we've said, Macaulay has dealt with. It still leaves some issues, but as I think we've had such a long time to think about it. I've read and read and read this, gone back to the joint plan, gone back to the MPPF and so on. And then we had a very interesting and quite difficult housing workshop for all councillors a few weeks ago, just after our first presentation list. So it comes, doesn't it, to this issue of balance, as Mr. Fletcher said. So really, having looked at all the issues, I do come back to the analysis based on our joint plan and the MPPF, and the dementias of the crisis, the housing crisis that we're facing nationally, but particularly in Plymouth. And you all know the figures, they're absolutely frightening. And so I would just like to mention that the Council's housing delivery team, who say they're committed and strongly support this, because it will make a significant difficult to the urgent housing crisis that we have in Plymouth. So we're all being asked to say how we make this balance, and I feel after a lot of thinking that that's the way I would do it.
Thanks. Alison.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a question of coming back to trees and numbers. Can I just be clear that we're losing 5, but we're gaining 12 actually on the site, and then an additional off-site. Of the trees that are being proposed to put on site, I'm assuming they're not all going to be oaks because the space doesn't allow. Are species being specified at this stage, or is that for the developer to decide?
If memory serves, in Table 4 of the arboricultural report, it sets out the specific species type for each tree going in. Yep.
Kathy.
Like Maddie, I was away on the 29th of August and I was unable to listen to the arguments there. And because of that, I think I'm unable to make a balanced decision today, one way or the other, so I shall abstain.
That's fair enough. Thanks for the heads up there. I know Angela will want to apologise to Mr. Fleming. I don't know who Mr. Fletcher is. That's probably someone.
I do apologise. Sorry.
Entirely separate, but in the heat of the debate, these things happen. Kathy was the last person. Matt.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just get clarification on the tree protection order? It was put in 6 months ago, and we haven't got a response to it yet. Why is that?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So the local authority's kind of powers to preserve trees come in the same section of the Act, so for both planning applications and preserving trees through condition, and also then the purposes of serving a TPO. So the two things are directly related. The tree information has been submitted as part of the application and is before you for consideration. So the decision on the TPO will follow pending the decision on the application.
Okay. Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. If I recall correctly, at the previous meeting where this application was discussed, Councillor Tippett's raised a really important point about the Equality Act. That's partially been answered today by the extra information presented to us today. And this is about the properties designated not just for full wheelchair user access. Is that correct? So I get that, this isn't, this is perfectly legal and within the framework. I just think it's a shame that, this is another, it's a shame that those houses aren't fully wheelchair accessible in that design framework, because I do think there is a need. If you look at the social model of disability, it's about looking at how we can change the environment rather than putting the onus and the burden on those with disabilities to actually adapt to the environment around them. So I will probably be voting in favour of the application, but I do so with a heavy heart for those reasons. Thank you.
No, it's totally understandable. I mean, part of the difficulty, as we all know as we work through our time on the planning committee, is that it's not a perfect world or a perfect system, and there are anomalies that we have to live with because we are in legal territory here that were we given a totally free hand, we might deal with as elected councillors differently. That's a very important aspect of what we do. So I totally get where you're coming from, Sarah. Last one to Josh in that case. Go on.
I got there. Very, very quick one, Chair. And again, just really for clarity, I understand we've been told today that there was a request to share the biodiversity report, and there was also mention of legal cases and things like that. Could I have some clarity? Is that something that's typically done at this point in a planning application if a biodiversity report is shared with the community?
Yeah, so I believe it was referring to the small sites metric, which shows the updated correction. That was uploaded yesterday, but yeah, we did have some technical issues, but it should be on there now.
It's on there now. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, Josh. Thanks. Well, thanks everybody again for the second of what have been two in-depth examinations of what's clearly a controversial site. No one would doubt that. As Angela said, it's all about balance, and nobody likes to see any green space of any size removed, but we have to counter that with the housing crisis that we all know that we're in, and that doesn't make for easy or pleasant decision making, but we do have to address both of those issues. I'm very, very satisfied following the extra work that all officers, can I thank everybody who's contributed, have put in. I think we are in a position where we can grant the planning permission, and that's not an easy thing to do. It's not something that anyone would celebrate in itself, but we do have to recognise that housing provision is what it is, and the housing crisis does need to be addressed. And an awful lot of our deliberations have focused understandably on the green space, amenity space, the trees. Everybody would accept that and not be surprised. But there are people waiting for housing, and I'm expecting an awful lot of sites to come forward under the plan for homes, which will be difficult. It will be tricky, and it will cause controversy. Our job is to find a way through that maze, working with officers, listening to residents and applicants. That's work to come, but as for today, I think we are in a position now to grant conditionally with all the extra information that we've heard, and thanks once again for providing that to us. So that's where I am, and if we could open the proceedings, please, I'd be grateful. Okay, I'll declare that passed. Thank you very much indeed for all your input there, and we'll have an argument later on about what the plurimetric actually is, because I think that's a whole other level of controversy that we don't want to touch on now. Item 7 is the list of planning applications for this cycle. Is there anything anybody wants to raise there? No, and I don't think we have any appeal decisions to consider, Stuart, so we'll await the next lot. There's no exempt business, so I'll say thanks very much, everybody, for your input today, and see you all next time.